All right, here we go. Mics are hot. Ready, camera one. Take one. We are rolling. Ready in 3, 2.
This Soonerscoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. If you're ready to see the rest of the world just as clearly, get your fresh perspective at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIX. Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoya here from the Soonerscoop.com studios. Another recruiting report and a little bit of high school action to get into from the Under Armour camp down at Melissa High School, their beautiful indoor facility. Josh McCuistion joining us. He was in the DFW area. I think the people of Melissa would be okay with us saying the DFW-esque area. But how was it? It sounded like it was a really good camp. We'll be talking about a number of guys that Oklahoma's obviously recruiting in on. Peyton Houston, Mason James here locally. Norman North product was down there. Kevin Ford, Joseph Graves out of the Tulsa area. So plenty to get into. But just overall, Josh, how'd you think everything went at the Under Armour 2025 stop?
I thought it was one of the better and deeper camps I've seen in a while. A lot of Oklahoma targets. Obviously, you're going to be able to tell by how deep this show goes. We got a lot of guys to talk about. But I think with the location at Melissa, like you talked about Joseph Graves coming down from Tulsa. Well, that's just a straight shot down 75. It's a pretty easy run from Oklahoma City. And then obviously a 30-minute drive from Dallas. And really, there's nowhere in Dallas, even like you get way out west to Aledo and the, kind of West Fort Worth, you're still only talking a little over an hour or so. Like, it's just not that bad of a connection from really anywhere that you're looking to draw talent from.
All right, very good. Let's jump into it. No place better to start than the 2027 quarterback out of Evangel Christian. I think Oklahoma fans have become quite familiar with the name. I'm sure a lot of people will become familiar with the name. Peyton Houston, what did you think of the 2027 quarterback?
This was obviously my second chance to see, actually third chance, including OU summer camp. So pretty familiar with Peyton. I didn't think it was the best I've seen him throw the ball, but I mean, the guy took home MVP and he deserved it. I mean, he was very good on the day. I thought he was super consistent. And the thing that stood out to me is, like, he's not a guy that tries to rip it every time, but man, when he wants to let it go, he can really whip it out there. He had one where I thought the corner was going to pick it, was going to jump underneath a little out route, and Houston just hits him. I mean, like, you could hear the ball. It's about 3 or 4 feet in front of me, and the ball just slaps the hand of the receiver, and the guy ends up turning it upfield and would have made a big play in a live game action. But it was, again, I thought he was just so consistent through the day, and I thought he, blended good footwork, good athletic ability, and again, like I said, a lot of arm talent as well.
Josh, I don't know. I can't remember the last time we talked about Peyton Houston, but what's his relationship maybe been like with Ben Arbuckle since he's been hired? Because I know Peyton was somebody that OU identified long before Ben got on campus. Just what's that relationship been like between those two?
It's gone really well from what Peyton and I spoke for a little while yesterday. We're kind of planning to catch up. He did, I think, about a dozen interviews, and I was just like, man, let's let you breathe for a minute. But we're going to catch up here before long. But in what we have talked about, I think he likes Ben Arbuckle. I think there's a very easy connection there. He's one of those guys that really seems to like Oklahoma. Like, I just think he kind of the ideals of the program, what they're selling him. And then you add in, obviously Arbuckle's connection to guys like Cam Ward and now John Mateer. I think that appeals to a guy like Peyton Houston is, a guy that wants to sling it all around, but is also clearly a good athlete. I think the night we saw him, he rushed for like 115 yards and 3 touchdowns or something. So he's clearly not just a pocket passer, and that's all he does. But I think he likes Oklahoma. He'll be back in less than a month. He's going to be at Future Freaks on March 8th. So you'll see, kind of that chance for that to really start moving forward again, where I think, Oklahoma, I think, did a pretty nice job, honestly, of just kind of holding steady, kind of holding serve while all this was going on, all that changeover and everything that, frankly, just didn't look that appealing to a quarterback. I think they did a good job kind of keeping Peyton Houston at least interested. And now that Ben Arbuckle's kind of on the case, I think they're starting to build some momentum again.
He was somebody that Chad Simmons talked to after the camp as well, and we have that on 3, Soonerscoop.com. You can go to the front page and see it if you want to check out more. He talked about Georgia, LSU, Miami, OU, Texas, and as Josh said, headed back to Norman very soon, here in the spring coming up. So we will, I'm sure, be checking back in with Peyton Houston in the coming months, and obviously later on into the next couple of years, really, being a 2027 commit or a 2027 target. Somebody more locally, Mason James, he kind of headlined, it sounds like, the wide receiver group. It sounds like he had another positive performance in front of a lot of eyeballs on Sunday.
Yeah, and I want to start off by giving just a little shout out to Mason. You know, Eddie, you've been to these camps. Like, when they're over, everybody just kind of breaks out in 100 different directions. You're trying to track guys down. And Mason, I literally had just gotten done interviewing Aljour Miles, and Mason, I kind of turned around looking for him, and he's right there. And he's like, hey, man, just thought you'd want to, if you wanted to catch up. And you're like, perfect, beautiful, thank you. So we had a little chance to talk, and I love where Oklahoma is with him. I think they're doing a really good job. He confirmed that's his first official visit that he's got set, is that he'll be there at June 20th for the Champ U barbecue. So that's obviously big news for OU. The thing that stood out to me, and again, Mason just did what he does. He's making a lot of plays. He was really tough to cover, especially in man-to-man situations. He's just so quick, and he's such a good route runner. There's just a lot that he brings to the table. But I was actually talking to our guy Cody Belair, and he was talking about watching Mason's tape, and we were just kind of having a conversation about what we like so much about it. And for Norman North, he does a lot of different stuff. He's not a guy that just runs go routes or just runs bubble screens. Like, they really do everything with him. I really like the way they use him in that offense. And you could see that on Sunday in Melissa. Like, he really did a little bit of everything. He was one of the few guys that worked in the slot, and then he would bounce outside and do some work there as well. So again, and he talked about OU telling him, they want me to be a guy that can play a lot of different roles and do some different stuff. And, he showed why they have that interest with another really strong camp performance.
Josh, you've seen Mason quite a bit over the last year now. I think On3 has him ranked as the 47th best wide receiver, 36th in the industry rankings. Is this a guy that you could see maybe jump up? You mentioned talking to some guys down at camp, some national, reporters. Is this somebody that you could see, rising? Like, how good can Mason James be?
Mason's going to always be a tricky evaluation because, guys, we know, so much of what you're looking for when you get into that top 10, top 15, it's height, it's weight, it's speed. It's like, what are the things that are truly transferable to the college level? And Mason is 5'10", 5'11". He's not a guy that's going to go run, 10.5 or, 10.3 in track. Like, that's just not who he is. He's just a really, really good football player. And so, I'm torn because I understand the kind of we want to bet on the guy who is the freakish athlete. But at the same time, you want to bet on, a guy that just makes insane plays. Like we talked about, really is as diverse as any receiver you'll find in the way he's used and the things he does. But I think a move up is definitely possible. If you told me he got into the top 25, I could believe that. Beyond that, I think people are going to knock him at times just because, like I said, he's not a huge height, weight, speed guy.
Somebody else that we will be talking about, I'm sure, here over the next couple of years, Aljour Miles, 2026 recruit out of Kaufman, Texas, somebody that you saw here during the football season this past year. Just, I guess, in kind of comparison, what'd you make of Aljour Miles' day down in Melissa?
Yeah, while you talk about Mason, there is an absolute antithesis there with Aljour Miles, who is just a big physical specimen of a receiver. I'd say probably about 6'2", 195. Just a big, strong guy. And he's gotten even bigger since I saw him in the football season. He's really starting to fill out his frame. And I talked to him I mentioned talking to him after the camp, and he talked about really focusing on his speed. That's something he really felt like he was, he's been working on since the end of their season at Kaufman. And I think he goes, I think that's what people knock me for. I think that's what people think I need to get better at. I need to grow as. And he's worked on that speed. And I thought he probably, along with Ethan, Booby Feaster from DeSoto, I thought they were the two best receivers I saw all day. I really, Booby is so refined and he's so good, and he's done all this for so long that, he's special. He is. But Aljour Miles, like you're just like, man, this guy's got a lot of room to keep getting better. He doesn't know how good he can be yet. So you see some stuff. But again, I just think he is rapidly emerging, and he's a different kind of player. But Eddie, it kind of reminds me of a guy we really got enamored with at that point last year, and that's Elijah Thomas, who really showed up at the Under Armour camp and had a huge day. But same kind of deal where you're like, man, his physical tools, if he figures it all out, he's really got a chance to be special.
Josh, where is he in terms of priorities for Oklahoma? Where is he at in his recruitment?
I would say these two receivers, and I did tell you guys, I wanted to mention Mason James and Aljour Miles. There was a lot of dapping and back patting and, kind of chatter between those two all day long. And I talked to both of them about it afterward. We'll have write-ups kind of about their relationship and how that kind of started. But, with Aljour, I really think he's very near the top of OU's board. And I feel the same about Mason James. I would say if Oklahoma said we got to have two guys, I could make the case those are the two guys that they would push the hardest for, obviously to go along with Daniel Odom, who's already committed. So I think those are two huge priority type guys. Now, he's got a bunch of official visits. I think he's already got 5 set. He may take a couple more. He's going to take some trips, but I do kind of expect Oklahoma on June 20th. He's another guy that'll be there for Champ U. I expect that will be his last visit, and then he'll probably sit down and make a decision, somewhere after that. I'm sure Oklahoma has some hopes that maybe they can get Mason James and he excited, and maybe something happens during the visit. We'll have to obviously watch that over the next few months. But I think Oklahoma is both in a good spot and really covets him.
Josh, just real quickly, how many receivers do you think they want to take in this class? Obviously, last year they had a bunch of guys committed, ended up only taking 2. In Elijah Thomas and Emmanuel Choice. How many receivers do you think we could see in this class?
I think it's probably 4. I think they'd like to add one more aside from, like I said, Odom, James, Miles, and then you can kind of have a conversation about who you might think number 4 is. But I do think those 3 would be I think 3 is the bare minimum. And a 5 I wouldn't rule out just because, like you said, George, last year was supposed to be bigger. They had to make some changes. Obviously, some guys are going to graduate out this year. So they've got some, a little bit of movement in there with what they want to do and how they can do it. But I definitely I would think 4 is probably the number you're looking at.
It wasn't too long ago we were just kind of talking about this next guy out of his junior day visit, a Baylor commit currently out of the offensive player, running back, Ryelan Morris out of Honey Grove, Texas. And I know that you've come back and basically while we were talking before we started, said that you thought Ryelan Morris was unguardable at times on Sunday.
His speed and just lateral quickness, you're like, wow, that dude, and again, I've said it for years, and it's probably why we won't have a lot of linebacker talk in this, because I don't focus that hard on linebackers at these camps, because it's just a woeful mismatch, and it's not fair to them. You're going to put tape up and everybody's going to be like, that linebacker can't play. But there are guys even within that, that acknowledgement where you watch him at running back and you're like, I don't care what this is. This guy can play. And I talked to Ryelan a little bit after camp, and he talked about Oklahoma kind of giving him the pitch of it's not just running back where we see you. We might put you in the slot some. We might do some different stuff. So that kind of speaks to what they think of him as a receiver, and that's what he showed. This wasn't just a guy, you can see it here on some of the clips. This isn't a guy that's just making – the standard running back catches. He's making stuff over the shoulder. He's running, running nice routes. He looks super comfortable in all that he's doing. But, you put his speed out there against some of these linebackers, even really good ones, because there were plenty of good ones on hand. And he's just cooking guys. And that's really all there is to it. But, again, the thing I took away was that conversation he'd clearly had with Ben Arbuckle talking about how they might use him. And you just kind of can't help but think okay, this is a guy that's going to be creative. We talked about this, we watched Oklahoma's offenses, for years, for close to a decade, just be wildly imaginative and creative and all these things. And we haven't seen that as much lately. This is a guy that's going to do some different stuff. And I love the ideas he's bringing, using a guy like Ryelan Morris like that.
Josh, same question I asked you about the receiver. Running back, they only bring in one this last year. I would assume they'd want to bring in more than one this year. And does Morris, since he, like you're saying, he can kind of play different positions, do you add, maybe 2 running backs plus Morris or 1 running back plus Morris?
I think it's going to be 2, and that include whether, I think that's whether it includes Morris or not, because that's clearly going to be his primary position. Yep. It's just kind of a deal where I think they see it as, okay, we could come out in a 2-back look and we could shift you out and we throw the defense's numbers off and we can do some different things there. So I think that is something Oklahoma just likes to, okay, we could, not have to substitute and can kind of change up what our numbers look like. But yeah, I think you're looking at 2. I think Oklahoma would like those 2 to come out of either Ryelan Morris, Caden Jones, or Jonathan Hatton. And I don't know that Oklahoma tremendously cares about which 2 of the 3 it is. They like all of them. They've got them all very highly evaluated. I'm sure they have a hierarchy, but it's not a deal where we see this as a huge fall off from one guy to the next. So I think really, they just complement each other pretty well because they're all different in their own ways. And to be honest, if I'm looking at it and I see, like, if you could get Hatton or Jones and then you have Morris, you're really talking about being able to be very diverse in what you do with your backfield there.
Good options for DeMarco Murray at the running back position. One more wide receiver that I wanted to bring up. Let's go Zion Robinson, Mansfield wide receiver.
Yeah. Guys, you talk about a big, long athlete. Now, it is very much like, I bet, you can see it here. This is, you're talking Jeff Mead, Quentin Chaney, like those big, long guys that we've seen OU have through the years. And I will say, and this is something I wrote on the board after the camp, I thought he fought the ball at times. Like, I thought there was some stuff where you're like, I wish he just looked a little more comfortable taking it in. But at the same time, you're talking about a guy that's 6'3", 6'4", can really run. He's got a track background. His dad's a track coach at TCU. So this is a guy that brings a lot of physical skills, but he's still refining his game and really learning, how to kind of clean up just all the little things that he'll need to be a great receiver.
Josh, as far as skill position talent, was there anybody that we haven't highlighted before we get into some of the offensive line, defensive line that you thought maybe we should mention that, we don't have video, but just really impressed you or maybe impressed you enough that you go, I want to see more of this guy moving forward?
For me, there's no question who it was. And it was actually a 2027 quarterback from Louisiana. There are 3 in the state of Louisiana in that class that are legitimate high national Power 5 type prospects. This kid's name was Malachi Ziegler. And I admit, like, I knew the name. I'd never seen him. I hadn't watched a minute of tape. And I was, again, talking to some of our On3 guys, and it was kind of like, keep an eye out on this guy. Just kind of watch for him. And I didn't know what number he was. I was focused on Peyton Houston, and I just start watching the guys going through their footwork drills, and I see this one kid, and he is so perfect and athletic, and he just looks so natural as he moves around, keeping his eyes up the field. And it's this kid. It's Ziegler. And I think I wrote in the post camp little breakdown I put up on the board. It was like when he was right, when he really got on the ball and he threw it like he wanted to, there wasn't anybody else in the camp that threw it like that. Like, when it really came off his hand, it was really pretty. He's got some good offers. It feels like maybe in the next 6 months, you could see him going from like a good SEC level of offers to all of a sudden, like, schools from around the country are getting more invested. So I really was intrigued by him. Again, you never can have your name on enough quarterbacks, and, you want to watch all of them, and you never know what's going to happen. But I thought he was tremendously interesting and is just a, probably 6'3", 205, just absolutely what you're looking for in a quarterback in this era. He was super impressive.
Hey, let us tell you about one of our good friends, William and Lauren. We've been telling you about them all season long as the official custom clothier of OU football. William and Lauren outfits your favorite OU players in custom suits that boost their confidence off the field to match their confidence on the field. Their perfectly tailored clothing ensures every suitor stands out and covered in style at prices that make luxury accessible. Visit William and Lauren in Oklahoma City or online at williamandlauren.com. That is in Oklahoma City, as well as here upcoming in a couple couple of, I believe, a couple months up in the T-Town, up in your neck of the woods, George, up in Tulsa. Online is WilliamandLauren.com. Dress like a champion and make your style as legendary as Oklahoma football. And I know that you'll be getting by there pretty soon for the big wedding here coming up this summer.
Yeah, next month. Super excited to go in and get fitted and get a pretty sweet suit. So
no doubt about
hooking
it.
us up.
We might need to get Josh up there. He's becoming a little bit jealous. Let's get back into a full recap from the Under Armour event down at Melissa High School down in the DFW area on Sunday, talking about some of the top performers with the great Josh McCuistion. All right, that's going to do it for the skill position talent. Let's go to the big boys, and no bigger guy to start with than Kevin Ford, 5-star defensive tackle, defensive lineman, really defensive end, out of Duncanville High School. We've, I think, cataloged everything that has been recorded as far as Oklahoma and Kevin Ford here as of late. We'll get to the recruiting in a second. He looks super impressive yet again on Sunday.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's so steady. It's kind of like what I was saying with Mason James and with Peyton Houston. He was just good. Every single one-on-one rep, he looked good through drills. I don't know that he has that one thing where you say, well, that's going to be what he wins football games with. Like, you know, you talk about R. Mason Thomas, that speed. Oh, man, he's dangerous coming off the corner. I don't know that he has that one thing, but he's really good at a lot of things. And, you know, you watched him use his hand, how he can dip his shoulder. He's very natural turning the corner. Like, there's just a lot that you really like there. He's also, it was my first chance to really size him up in person. He's a little bigger than I thought he was. He's a legitimate 6'3" and some change. He's probably 235, 240 pounds for, you know, a guy still wrapping up his junior year of high school, right where you'd want him to be. No problems at all there. So, again, I liked a lot of what I saw, and I just thought he was super steady through the whole camp. There wasn't a moment where you're like, oh, okay, that's going to need some work. Obviously, lots of room to improve, but I just was very impressed with how consistent he was snap in and snap out.
I think last time we talked about him, Josh, you said that you thought, you had some momentum with him. How do things stand right now? I know
what was the scuttlebutt?
Yeah,
what was the scuttlebutt around the recruiting reporters with Mr. Ford?
Yeah.
You know, it really felt like a lot of I've heard kind of behind the scenes, I've heard a lot of talk about OU and Alabama as of late. He also mentioned A&M, LSU, and I know the A&M folks really think they're right in the mix there, and they are. I kind of keep hearing OU and Alabama a lot with him. I know OU's really made a big impression on him. He's been up there a bunch over the last 6 months, 9 months. Kind of one of those indicators that you look at and say, oh, okay, he seems pretty sincere here. And then he went out to Alabama, I want to say the last weekend before the dead period began in February. And I thought that visit, from everything I heard, went really, really well, really impressed. But he did come home, and I know almost immediately kind of reached out to Oklahoma, and they had a sit down and a conversation. So I do think Oklahoma is in really good shape there. They've made him a huge priority, guys. Like, there are positions, and we've talked about a couple of them, where I think there is some, you know, there's clearly a top tier of guys they want, but maybe, you know, within that tier of, okay, we're going to take 3 guys, there's 5 or 6 that could that could do what we need. In this, I feel like defensive end, Oklahoma is very clear that Kevin Ford and Jake Krull from IMG Academy are 2 right there at the top of their board that they are very focused on.
Duncanville. We'll see what
Duncanville.
happens.
Can Oklahoma knock down that door?
Yeah.
They've been knocking for, it seems like, 2 decades now. A place that they have, and a place that they've had success, and a place that had somebody committed. 2027 Zane Rowe, you saw him yet again, the former Oklahoma commit in the 2027 class, obviously backed away from his commitment here in recent months. But Zane Rowe, he just continues to, from just looking at the video that you sent back, Josh, it looks like physically he continues to take that development step here as he enters his junior season, which is still crazy to me to think.
You have to keep reminding yourself that this kid's like a sophomore in high school. Like, I mean, he is so big and so strong. Because, I mean, like, look at him, guys. I mean, he is 6'5" and probably 255, if I'm guessing. And look at him playing a stand-up. This is Zayden Crimpin he's going against, guys, who's got a bunch of good offers, going to play Power 5 football, plays at a really good program there at Prosper. I mean, he's just a problem. Like, he is really good. And what I like, and Eddie, you remember last year, like we were watching him go against Fasusi and some of those guys. And it was one of those deals where if he could win with the first move, he could win. Like, if it was burst or if he, cut inside, whatever it was. But the second they had an answer for that, and when you're going against Fasusi and Haywood, Lamont Rogers, and all those guys that were there last year that were so stinking good, guys usually have an answer. This year, when you would see it, like a guy had a resolution to what he was doing, he had a counter. Sure. Okay, you got that? Okay, I'm going to bounce back this way. Like, he is starting to learn how to be a pass rusher rather than just like we talk about all the time, like being a really good athlete that kind of plays defensive end. He's learning to be a defensive end. And again, I think if he's not a top 5 guy in the state of Texas in 2027, I'll be very, very surprised.
Josh, is OU still the team to beat despite his decommitment?
The only visit he has planned this spring, he's going to go to Georgia next month. He doesn't have anything else on the books. You can tell he's kind of working to get out to some of these schools that he hasn't seen as much. And that was, Zane and I talked after camp, and I that was the impression I got was I've seen Oklahoma a lot. It's not that I don't want to get back. He was talking about getting up for a spring practice, maybe coming for the spring game, like maybe coming for camp. Like, he's got plans to be up at Oklahoma 2 or 3 times in the next 6 months, I think is pretty fair to assume. But at the same time, he knows OU so well that I think he's like, I decommitted because I do want to see what else is out there, so I got to go do those things. And if I'm at Oklahoma all the time, I'm not getting the opportunity to kind of do what was the entire point of this. But you hear him talk about Mikael Chavis. He's like, that's still my guy. We're still really close. He loved how Chavis handled it. There were no hard feelings. It was, because, again, we talked about it when it happened. He called OU. He told them first. He handled it as well as you possibly could have done. And I think there's just zero animosity on either side. I don't know if I would say Oklahoma leads. I really think he is trying to be as open as possible. But there's no question that Oklahoma is the program he is most comfortable with.
Seems like a good 2025 football season might help his recruitment too.
Sure. I don't think it could help. I don't think it would hurt. Yeah. There's no doubt about that, and especially because that would mean that the guys that are coaching him or recruiting him probably would be around for that 2026 season. Okay, let's go Tulsa. Somebody that kind of burst onto the scene when he came down here for Brent Venables' football camp this past summer. This was, I think, probably would have been the first time that you saw him in a real Under Armour type environment, the camp setting, combine setting, if you will. Joseph Graves, he was super impressive when we saw him at the indoor facility in Norman. How was the experience on Sunday down in Melissa?
You could tell that it was a step up for him. There were times when being a young guy, he's 2027, guys. I mean, like, He's a puppy. He's got plenty of time to grow. But at the same time, I thought he was good. Like, I mean, you can see what people are excited about. What I will also say is so this is Peyton Miller from Anna, who not only has an OU offer, but is a guy that took home the O-line MVP, 81 right here. The problem, and I do want to defend Joseph just a little bit, there weren't a lot of guys that were wanting to play on the inside to play at defensive tackle. He was usually when you see it cycle out, Eddie, there was no cycling out. Like, he would just move to a different one of the 3 interior positions and go play that. So I think as the camp wore on, he got a little tired and he wore down a little bit. But again, you can see the quickness here. And again, even that right there, they got me inside. I'm going to spin back out. But and then you just watch him bully here. So there's a lot to his game. Again, he plays like a kid whose dad played college football. He has a better understanding than a lot of guys you're going to be around. A lot of guys his age just don't know what's happening. And here, I mean, he just long arms that dude into the quarterback and it's all over. So again, it's and hey, look, Joseph being the nice guy there. But yeah, there's a lot to build on here. This is a really promising guy. And like I said, this kid right here that he's going against took home the O-line MVP, is a year ahead of him, has a bunch of big-time offers. And again, just look here. He still can't deal with Joseph getting underneath him and kind of driving him backward. Now, that's technically an O-line win in a camp setting like that, but you can still see, like, there's good stuff to find even when maybe he doesn't win the rep.
He's listed as 6'1", 240 on
Looks
On3.
A little bit heavier than that, maybe?
Yeah, I bet he's got to be pushing 260, Josh. 270?
Yeah, I would say he's probably 6'1", because when we saw him in the summer, I don't think I would have given him 6'1". I think he's grown a little bit since then. He's probably 6'1" and just a little. He's never going to be the Gerald McCoy, the 6'5" guy, but he's tall enough, especially with how quick he is and how active he is. And I would guess he's probably 270, 275 right now. And you can see it. I mean, on the tape, he carries it well, guys. It's not like it's he's got bad weight on him. There are some similarities, I would almost say, with he and like a body type like maybe like Grayson Halton, kind of that same similar kind of like always going to be a little on the light side, but if he can maintain quickness and agility, then he's probably going to be fine.
Another defensive lineman to get through, and we should have mentioned him when we were talking about Duncanville, but a 2026 teammate of Kevin Ford, Landon Barnes. This is the first time that I saw him, and there's a lot of intrigue here at 6'3", 220 is what we have him listed at on 3. Maybe a little bit bigger than that, Josh.
Yeah, and guys, the thing, like, okay, so I talked about KJ Ford earlier, and here goes Barnes. Like, the twitch is different. Like, when we talk about Ford, like, he's really steady. He's going to be a guy, snap in, snap out, you know what you're getting. Barnes, there's more floor, but there's also more ceiling, because he'll pop out of that stance and you're like, oh man, he can really challenge an outside shoulder, really make a guy have to use his drop step and just be a lot cleaner on the corner of that pass rush. But I mean, this is like, again, you can see how raw he is. Like, he can get off balance, he can get a little out of control, but at the same time, he's so quick and he's so active with his hands that he was just beating guys at times, and you're like, oh, okay, he's a guy I see where I was talking about, KJ Ford maybe not being an R. Mason Thomas type. Landon Barnes kind of is that type. Now, I'm not saying he's that good. I don't want to make that comparison. I'm just saying he's a speed guy. You could stand him up. He could play like that 3-4 outside linebacker that, used to be so popular in the NFL. He could be that kind of guy, because I don't know if he's ever going to play at 260 or 270, but he could absolutely be a problem. It's kind of a stand-up outside linebacker or a 4-3 edge in certain schemes. So he's Eddie, like you, I didn't know a lot about him, but man, I really liked some of the just raw tools that I saw.
How involved has OU been with him lately, Josh?
To my knowledge, not a lot. And I think that is largely, kind of built on George. Like I said, I think their focus is so they've got Cruel, they've got KJ Ford, and they've got a couple of other guys they like. But I think that's kind of the deal, is maybe he needs to put a little more on tape and kind of sell a little bit. But if he's gonna have a chance to put himself in front of OU, because they're gonna be there at spring practices at Duncanville. They're gonna be there during the season. Like, they're gonna see this kid, and if he makes some plays, it wouldn't shock me at all if OU got involved at some point.
There's a couple of these guys that I have to recall the player roster that you sent me to see who and match up the number with who each guy is. Didn't have to do that for Big 77. Felix Ojo, as we flip over to the offensive side, 6'7", 274, kind of in that same ilk, if you will, of some of the guys that you were just talking about, whether it be Michael Fasusi or Ty Haywood, Ryan Foje. One of those guys in the 2026 class, offensive line-wise, everybody's going to know.
Yeah, like, we talked about how crazy that group was last year, Eddie. Even while that wasn't one of those things we needed hindsight on.
Sure.
Like, you're watching Fasusi go one rep, Haywood go the next rep, Rogers, even John Turntine, a 2026 guy that you were like, wow, he's really good. Felix last year, you were like, man, he's all arms and legs. He's kind of all over the place. When I saw him in San Antonio, you're like, oh, the light's starting to come on. You're starting to see him figure it all out. And at 6'7" and probably 260 pounds, he's still incredibly lean. He looks like a power forward. And as I watch him go through drills, you're like, well, okay, he should be so good at the bag stuff and that kind of stuff. And as the day went on, he was. But early on, you're kind of watching him and like, he's not overwhelming me here. The second it got into anything where he had to slide his feet and move laterally, you're like, oh, okay, that's a guy that's going to be, if everything works out, like he's going to be an NFL draft pick someday. Like, because guys don't move like that. It reminded me a lot of a guy that has always been one of my litmus tests of great young offensive tackles. That's Tyron Smith from years ago that played for the Cowboys for a decade and was an incredible offensive lineman. He's so big. He's so athletic. And I mean, again, like you're watching him there, okay, like that, the kid he's going against is maybe 215 pounds playing end, and is a good little player. I don't mean to downplay him at all, but like there's just not much you can do with Ojo. Like he's so long. It's like, I don't know, going against a spider or something. Because how are you going to get around him? You can't go inside. Even if you get the edge on him, like you beat him to the corner. Okay, great. He's so long and his stride is so big that half step, he's going to make up for it in no time. Like, and the thing that I'll say, and I said it in San Antonio too, that really surprised me when I watched Felix Ojo, he's much more physical than you think he's going to be. Like you look at him and you're like, he's going to be kind of soft and it's just going to be kind of, chest bumping and that kind of stuff. He'll lock out his arms. Like he'll base out on you if he can, and really, really will just stonewall you if you give him the opportunity.
He's got a lot of big offers, Josh. I mean, the big boys are after him. Who's Oklahoma going to have to beat to get him? It seems like Texas is obviously, it seems like maybe they're number one right now.
I think it's Texas, and then I think everybody else is chasing. And I think Oklahoma, beyond Texas, has as much a chance as anybody. My question is for Oklahoma, are they going to do what they're, and I think everybody can read through the lines here. Are they going to do again what they had to do last year with Fasusi? And that's really get aggressive, be, very NIL forward and some of those things. And I don't mean that like that's what Felix Ojo's thinking about, but I'm just saying there's a lot of good options for him, and they're all going to be – they don't all have 2 top 100 offensive tackles coming in their freshman class. Oklahoma can kind of make that decision. Like, is this where we want to allocate? Is this what we want to do? I don't know. Like, we're going to have to watch that play out. But even with landing Fasusi last year, I sure wouldn't say that's a waste of money, because I think Ojo is another truly special guy. One of those, I think he's probably going to end up as a top 5 offensive tackle in the class. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he ends up as a 5-star. And even wherever you want to say he ends up ranked, I feel very confident saying there's probably not going to be an offensive tackle in the country that has more upside than Felix Ojo. It's just a matter of, how does he put on weight? How does he develop? Because he's going to need some time. He's not going to be as ready physically, in all likelihood, as like Michael Fasusi is when he arrives. So there's just a little different thing there, but the upside is just humongous.
Let's move into the interior, a name that I'm sure is familiar with Oklahoma fans. His brother was here for a while. Drew Evers out of Flower Mound High School down in Texas, obviously Nick Evers' brother, 6'3.5", 285, and certainly seems like his recruitment has continued to skyrocket here over the last year.
Yeah, a guy that's, again, just so good. And I remember, when I first start watching Drew, I still can't ever get over the fact that he's an offensive lineman after knowing, Nick. Like, they're just such different body types. But, yeah, so this is Drew Evers going against KJ Ford. And they took 4 reps against each other on Sunday. And I thought, I would have given the edge to Ford, but I thought Evers did very well playing at tackle, which I don't think is his most – I don't think that's his biggest upside. I don't think that's where he's most likely to fit. But, watch him just slide. Now, he opens the door there a little bit, but, it's okay. Again, you're going against a top 150 defensive end. You're playing out there on the edge. When I watch Evers, though, guys, the thing that sticks out to me every time, I want him to play center. I watch him, and I see a center. 6'3.5". He's not huge. He's not incredibly long. But he's a really sharp kid. He's played a lot of football. And, you talk about a guy that could be, one of those special centers that maybe is a first-round, second-round pick. We don't see a lot of those kind of guys. Evers could be that kind of guy. I really believe that he might have a special upside at that position.
Josh, I feel like everybody you see, you want them to play center. It's
hard to find a good center.
I want to spin everybody, George. Like, if
Yeah.
you play tackle, I want you to play guard. Like, that is an inevitable part of my life. You're right.
Yeah.
Last but not least, I don't think he'll be moving to center anytime soon. Noah Best, out of Midlothian. We saw him back here during the summer at Brent Venables football camp. Continued contact with Bill Beatenbow. It seems like he's still continuing to move into his senior season in a pretty good spot with Oklahoma and Noah Best.
Guys, there's a ton of, like, Drew Samia energy when I watch him play. Because, like, he's not a guy – I mean, you can watch him going through drills here. And really, for a guy as big as he is and knowing he's going to be a guard, his knee bend there is pretty good. But, like, going through drills, you were just kind of like, okay, like, it's solid. Like, it wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, but he didn't blow you away. And then all of a sudden he gets on one-on-ones, and he is just killing. Like all he's got to – he gets too high there. But again, once he sets his base, it's over. Like, and he's so good about that, and he's so strong in his lower half. I really, again, this is a guy. He plays with some aggression. He plays with some violence. When I say Drew Samia, I know that paints a picture for some people. Maybe not quite on the ragged edge like Drew was at times, but just, again, that very physical guard, going to lead block for you, going to maybe be, the guy that's in front of the counter, that kind of stuff. Like, you see a lot of ways he could work and be a really good player. And, again, I know George will want to ask, but I like where OU is at this point.
I do want to ask, though, Josh, because we just talked about a handful of offensive line guys in the 26 class. How many guys do you think they want to take? We talked a lot last year. It was a huge class, probably the best of Bill Beatenbow's career. But the way that you got to keep stacking them, right? Like, we've talked a lot about that. You can't, miss 1 year, and then that becomes an issue later on. So how many guys do you think they're looking at for this offensive line class?
I was talking to somebody, a personnel guy, kind of over the weekend, and just kind of unrelated, and they were talking about there's kind of becoming this common belief between your lines, between the offensive line and defensive line, you need to be looking at like 10 to 12 guys a year, period. Like, I mean, that can include the portal, that can be whatever, but like, that's the kind of turnover you're looking at, because guys are obviously going to leave, guys are coming in, and it's just how good your quality is. And they were kind of saying, if you hit a quarter of that, if you hit on 25% of 12 portal or 12 new incoming guys, that's three or four top shelf players there. Like, that's what you're looking to do. And if you can do that year over year, hey, you've got quality players kind of cycling in all the time. So to me, I think you're looking at 5 or 6. That's kind of what I think the number should be. I thought they were probably one lighter than they really wanted to be last year, because guys, to me, I'm one of those ones, like, on the offensive line, you should be signing 5 every year, like, just every year, because injuries, because transfer, like, it's just a high attrition position, to forget how hard it is to project. Like, there's guys that we think are going to be superstars, and so do the colleges, that don't do anything. Like, I mean, so you just have to keep kind of funneling that talent in there and making sure it's, going to be quality. To me, I think it's guys like Drew Evers, like Noah Best. I think those are the hits you've got to get, because I like where Oklahoma is starting to go at tackle. And I'm certainly not saying they don't need to get some more tackles. They do. You have to continue to build that depth. But to me, I think guard is where you've got to have those guys that you could see, okay, this guy could have a role in 2026. Like, this guy could push for playing time that early. Where tackle, I think you can maybe take a project. You can take a guy that, okay, he's going to be 2 years before he's really ready to help. And I think that's kind of how that'll probably end up breaking down. Though, again, you never know with all the volatility, like I said, with all that can happen with the portal, with injuries and everything else.
Continued coverage from the Under Armour Combine down at the Belissa, down in the DFW area on SoonerScoop.com. We have a ton of stories already out from the national writers, just in terms of how everybody stacked up against one another. And then, of course, Josh, you have some interviews that we're going to be running here over the next couple days, as well as your own thoughts on some of the guys that we got into, obviously, here on the show. But you can read it on print and all that kind of good stuff as we move through the week. Camp season. It always is a grind, but we appreciate it. Josh, this is going to do it for the Recruiting Report. For Josh and George, I'm Eddie. We'll see you right back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel.